Some people like to start really slow and soft and gentle. Other people are turned on by fast and furious and passionate and intense. It really depends on someone's nervous system, amongst many other factors.
I'm Dr. Tina Kaiser, and as Leah likes to say, I'm the sciencey one.
And I'm Dr. Leah Sherman, and I'm the Cancer Insider.
And we're two naturopathic doctors who practice integrative cancer care.
But we're not your doctors.
This is for education, entertainment, and informational purposes only.
Do not apply any of this information without first speaking to your doctor.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast by the hosts and their guests are solely their own.
Welcome to the Cancer Pod. What happens to desire after a cancer diagnosis? That felt sense of being a sexual being in a body after it has been through something so life-changing. Claire Rumore has spent over 20 years helping people find their way back to intimacy, connection, and what she calls personal sovereignty. Then, in 2022, she was diagnosed with cancer herself and suddenly found she was on the other side of a conversation she'd spent her whole career having. The resource she desperately needed didn't exist, so she built it. Claire is the founder of cancerandintimacy.com, where she combines somatic coaching, sexological research, and evidence-informed tools to help people reclaim their sensual and sexual selves during and after illness. Welcome to the Cancer Pod, Claire.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So the first question I'm going to ask is sexological research.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Yeah. So it's based in sexology. So sexology is the ology, the science of sexuality, sex, the motivations for sex, our wiring, our anatomy, our physiology, but in particular, the psychosocial, even psychosexual. So our feelings about the sex we're having or not having in some cases. So looking at it through a social science lens instead of just a medical lens.
And so you've been doing this practice for, like I said, well over 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What brought you to it in the first place?
So originally I was planning to be an architect. That's what I'd wanted to do from the age of 4, go into architecture and design. And I even worked for architecture firms in high school, got scholarships for architecture school for university, started in architecture in college. And within 1 year, the first year of it, I realized, oh, this is not going to make me happy. But I sure am loving my liberal arts required classes. And so I began exploring the liberal arts. And from there, the way it worked was I gave up architecture, not knowing what another plan would be, but just knowing I couldn't drop out of college. And then sociology found me. And through that, the studies of sexuality, gender, and identity became my concentration. And I thought, well, on the other side of this, of my college career, I'll be completely unemployable with my liberal arts degrees, but I will have had a great time in college. And so little did I know I was going to be using my degree every single day of my life when shortly after college, I moved to California. And that's been about 20 years ago. So my career has had different iterations in the sexuality, sexology, sexological realms, including working for a sex toy company for some years when I first got here, being an intimacy coach for about 15 plus years now, and exploring the Erotic Blueprints as a framework and becoming an Erotic Blueprint coach, and a number of other things, including a pro-dom and other explorations in sexuality, but really aiming to understand people's motivations, their connection to their own desires and turn-ons. So that's how I got my start.
And then you were diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't that long ago.
No, so we're in 2026 now. That was the very end of 2022. So November 2022. For a few months leading up to that point, I knew that something was off, and I knew that my vitality was just starting to diminish. Sleep was becoming harder. I thought I was stressed out, burnt out, that type of thing. But I had injured my back and it just wasn't getting better. I'd lifted something heavy. And then a kind of a lump showed up in my hip crease that I thought was maybe from the lifting of the bottle. And, but again, things just felt off. So I went to the emergency room to get checked out. A friend recommended that. And then scans and tests from being there indicated that I had pancreatitis and I had inflammation in my colon, but I also, unbeknownst to me, had two mysterious masses in those same places. And they kept me for a few days, did biopsies, and then determined that indeed the tumors were cancerous. And then another round of biopsies determined that the origin was actually pancreatic. And that actually what I had going on was a stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So that was the diagnosis that is on my medical record now. But we dove right into healing, getting into treatment, obviously.
And so it was pancreatic cancer metastatic to your colon.
Yeah. Yep. So it had spread downward, which is very unusual.
And you went through
chemotherapy. Yeah.
And
Chemo
surgery?
Surgery happened, but it was unplanned. It was unplanned. Okay. So we started me right away in chemo treatments for combination for colon cancer and pancreatic because my case was an unusual one. And they sent it to tumor board to get other opinions and other ideas because I was not the poster child. You know, I was in my early-ish 40s at the time. And so I was an unusual case. I didn't care about diagnosis. I didn't care about staging, had no interest in that information at all. I just knew my vitality, my essence, my sense of well-being was not what I was used to. Something was really going on and needed to get to start healing. And it felt really important to me to do an allopathic, so like Western medicine, oncology track, but to also complement it with not so much other treatments that were consumables, because I didn't want anything, my care team didn't want anything competing with the chemo, but as much therapy, as much emotional processing, as much spiritual practice, as much just my own personal inquiry, as much of that, medical qigong and acupuncture, as much of that as I wanted, my oncologist was a green light for. And so I really partnered the West and the East together.
Sure.
In my experience. Mm-hmm.
And how are you doing now?
So I'm doing fabulous.
Great.
So long story short, that was 2022, and I dove full time into my healing and was very committed to coming out the other side, and just felt like, wow, this is an adventure, and I need to give this the meaning that I want to give it, not take personally or take on the looks of concern or what I've heard about other people's experiences with cancer and this particular type of cancer and staging and yada, yada. I just did my best to tune all of that out and stay very true to the outcome I wanted for myself. And as part of that, I also befriended the tumors that were in my body, got to know them, have conversations with them, coach them, and eventually say, okay, I'm done with being a sick person. I've learned so much. I thank you so much. And now I'm asking you to go live your best lives somewhere else. And then that was in January 2023. And then in February 2023, I actually landed in the hospital because my colon perforated.
Oh my.
And though this seems like a terrible turn of events and, oh gosh, now 10 steps backwards, this was actually the turning point, moving everything forward. Because it was in that procedure. So that was the surgery that was unplanned. And it was in that procedure they found that all evidence of tumors, all the tumors were gone and all evidence of cancer had left my body. So that was February 2023. And we're now in late February 2026. So it's been 3 years that I've been cancer-free and living in a different expression, a different experience, focused very much on health and well-being.
So prior to your diagnosis, were you working with cancer patients in your intimacy?
I had no connection to cancer patients, no experience with cancer patients, really no one in my immediate realm with cancer. This was not part of my world at all.
So how did your going through your treatment and having this cancer experience change your practice? Because now this is a part of your practice. You have a separate page on your website. You have resource kits for people to download. And
Exactly.
so what made that shift?
So what made that shift, I really must attribute all of that to my social worker, who was part of my care team when I was going through my journey. She had a little bit of an idea of my professional background, and we'd probably talked about it at some point. And there was one day she pulled me aside, and, I'm technically with a stage 4 diagnosis and no real guarantees I'm going to survive other than just my commitment to it. But she thought to point out to me this gap that I don't know all the different ways I would have noticed because my journey was so unique. I didn't have breast cancer or a gynecological cancer where the effect is going to be very front and center. And so when she pointed that out, noting to me, highlighting for me that the gap in care for cancer patients, even cancer survivors, and the need for support and education as it relates to intimacy, specifically changes to intimacy during a cancer journey. She said that gap is so huge. She herself, doesn't feel equipped, doesn't feel confident, would love to, wants to, just doesn't know where to start. And if I would ever consider taking it on, the need's so big that basically I and whomever else would join would never run out of work. So I give her all the credit for a lot of this. And so I dove into investigating, well, how could I bring my expertise, my skill sets, my knowledge bases to this world? And I spent much of 2024 and all of 2025 diving into that and building out cancerandintimacy.com, which is a website almost exclusively for patients, survivors, and their partners. But that's just the first part of my ecosystem for this journey, this mission.
As many people who work in cancer care as well as cancer patients and survivors will completely agree that this is something that is completely overlooked. And from my own personal cancer experience, when you go in for your appointment and you're given like the little iPad and you fill in all your side effects, and then you answer the question about sexuality, like sexual side effects or whatever, that doesn't always get addressed in your appointment. And, you kind of feel like, hello,
Didn't you see what I put in? Yeah,
and, I've had a, male oncologist who I love him, I respect him, but he was of very little help. And I was practicing at the same place where I was being treated, and I would have patients come up to me and say, like, they would open up to me and the other naturopathic doctors about what do I do about this or how do I manage that. And it's so challenging. And I came up with few certain things.
Yeah.
The first thing was, especially with my patients who are going through treatment for prostate cancer, I began to realize, because they don't teach you this in school, that a male perspective of intimacy is so much different than a female perspective. And so how do you work with your patients? Because if somebody is in a partnership with, let's say a woman is in a, committed relationship with their husband, and they're trying to explain that what they want from intimacy might not be the same thing that their partner wants. Like, how do you help bridge that understanding?
Right. So, in large part, the way that's bridged is not too different than how it's bridged in traditional sex therapy for folks who aren't even affected by illness. Because often we will find mismatched libidos, differing orientations, changes in life stage and life phase, especially menopause, andropause. These phases and stages of life will bring about the need for a similar conversation and similar framework and support measures. And so it really depends on the partners, on the couple, and the quality, I guess I could say, of their relationship, like how intact, what has the conversation around sexuality already been? Is that even a topic that has been present in their relationship even before cancer. So my work in this world is quite new. I don't have a large case study load to pull from at the moment, but I'll tell you what I'm planning for and developing for this purpose. And a big part of it is reframing for people, because our cultural conditioning is so negatively impactful to all of us for many, many number of reasons. My challenges growing up, apart from anything related to illness, were being raised in the southern part of the United States. So there's a certain cultural expectation of gender, of sexuality and intimacy, and also having been raised Catholic. So I spent a lot of my early adult life working through the impacts of these cultural influences. So every single human is going to have their own stuff that they're bringing into relationship and all. And shifting the orientation around sexuality and giving someone back their sovereignty around choice is a big part of what my work is focused on with my patients and survivors in the cancer world, but also my clients not affected by illness. And what I'm noticing people really need is permission, and is a list of possibilities, like an opening to seeing possibilities that in a narrower view that they were given through their conditioning, other possibilities were never made known. And so as I'm helping people redefine what intimacy means to them, what sex means to them, also what are their motivations for having sex? Let's not take for granted that we even know what those are, even if it seems like an obvious question. And also understanding any sort of emotional impact when we have a narrow definition and we're putting obligation and expectation on ourselves as it relates to sex and sex with our partners. This is causing a lot of stress. So in cancer work, it's super important for the patient to know that he, she, they can press the brakes, and that they're not being pressured by a partner to show up as they used to show up or have historically been able to show up, because that's not guaranteed, that's not fair, and that's not always available. And at the same time, the partner needs support around managing expectations and understanding how to hold the experience of their partner as their partner is going through a life-threatening, certainly life-altering diagnosis and treatment experience. So there's a lot of hand-holding in terms of introducing these concepts of, let's pause, let's go really slow, let's give agency to the patient, let's support the partner to understand that their needs are important, and their needs might need to be adjusted for a period of time, and really, we're expanding the aperture of what intimacy means, how it's expressed, and then how it can feed us. So there's a lot of angles to come at this from, but first is the redefining and the offering permission to feel what we're feeling and to need what we need, and then possibilities for what that can look like when a couple is navigating cancer.
And the communication part, where you're saying, like reframing intimacy, but then that's usually not a conversation that
exactly
people have in the first place. And so when, like you're saying, when you have this life-altering experience, this body-altering experience, this hormone-altering experience, all of that, there is pain, perhaps not just with the sexual experience, but there's often pain associated with the cancer. There's fatigue. There's just feeling like crap. I mean,
and those are just the physical symptoms. Then we add in the emotional symptoms, the psychological, the existential. There's a lot going on, and for everyone involved.
Exactly. And, even if the patient does have some sort of conversation with their care team, then it's often the partner who's left out.
In the current model. Yes, exactly.
Yes, in the model that we might have in
The unofficial model.
the
Yeah.
unofficial model.
Yeah.
Let's go back to intimacy. So
Mhm.
how would you define intimacy beyond sexual intercourse?
Well, first off, I would point out that intercourse is usually the experience and the definition that culturally we land on, and we combine unnecessarily, and we limit ourselves unnecessarily by doing so. And we do it blindly, unconsciously. We don't even realize that's the air we're breathing and the water we're swimming in. So first thing is pointing that out. And that kind of loosens the clutching to the idea. And then instead of me coming to the session and saying, now how you should be approaching or viewing intimacy as is this, and this also, is offer the question to the patient, the partner, and have them start to think of ways that intimacy can be expanded in its definition. What other activities could be included in intimacy? And also, maybe even more importantly, what's the purpose of intimacy? Really, why are we even interested in intimacy? This isn't just a biological imperative. There's something else motivating us. So let's reconnect with that. And often that gives us new definitions and new expansions.
One of my favorite recommendations for my patients with prostate cancer was when we would talk about intimacy. And again, I
Mhm.
did not have any training in my schooling. This is stuff
Mhm.
I was just trying to
Totally.
grasp at. I would recommend that they take their partner and do dance lessons.
Exactly.
And they would look at me like, "What?" And then usually their partner, wife, girlfriend would just look and be like,
Yes.
"Yes." And yeah, it was always a big surprise that something, I wasn't asking them to do a massage or, which again is, touch would be a big part of
Mhm.
intimacy, but also having the touch be something that you can do in public,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
have that experience. So, what are examples of things that you would talk to your patients about for exploring what intimacy means to them?
Mhm. One of the most important frameworks that I bring into the conversation with clients who are cancer patients, as well as non-illness impacted clients of mine, is the 5 erotic blueprints framework and methodology. And I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They were created by a sexologist named Jaya, and I found them to be so powerful. I've been diving into them the past 10 or 11 years to help me understand myself and now to help other people understand themselves. And so the 5 erotic blueprints, if you can imagine that there are 5 distinct pathways, access points to pleasure and to turn on, because not everyone is turned on by the same things. Some people like to start really slow and soft and gentle. Other people are turned on by fast and furious and passionate and intense. It really depends on someone's nervous system, amongst many other factors. But how is someone's nervous system wired to receive sensation, attention, intention, and therefore which types of activities become that person's pathway to pleasure? So these 5 include, I'll give you the names of them in a very brief description. That they are the energetic blueprint. So this would be someone who, amongst many other things, is turned on by slowness, by breathing together, by eye contact, by emotional connection, by deep conversations, by vulnerability, by a touch that's more hovering than intense and grabby. Someone who needs a very particular type of foreplay, as well as a significant amount of foreplay, just going very slow, full of anticipation, not a lot of expectation. So that's the energetic. Then we have the sensuals, who might be considered more of the traditional romantics. They like to have all of their senses engaged and stimulated. So that could be someone who's enjoying massage or a hot bath or wonderful smells, delicious foods, glorious music, a blanket or a type of sweater with a certain texture or fabric. these types of things really, or like having their neck kissed, like the slow lead in, lots of foreplay, whatever that means to a specific person. But again, this arc of anticipation. So that's the sensual. Then we have the sexual blueprint. These are folks who don't need foreplay. They have no interest in that. They go from 0 to 60 right away. They love the intensities, the passion. They love orgasm and naked bodies and genitals, and that everyone have an orgasm and multiple orgasms. They just really love sex. And I would say that's kind of the prototype, even the archetype that our culture in the United States likes to promote, certainly to cisgender heterosexual men. And then that's what we see show up in our porn, which is often what's teaching younger men these days how to view sex and what to expect from sex. And women are very much objectified in those contexts and expected to be the sexual blueprint, but on the receiving side. And when often many cis hetero women are not that at all. And also many cis hetero men are not that at all, are not oriented towards an intense sexual direct, I want what I want, give it to me. That's not their natural orientation, but that's a conditioning and a personification they take on a lot of times because they don't know there are other options. Now, the fourth blueprint is what we call the kinky erotic blueprint, but that doesn't necessarily mean whips and chains and 50 Shades of Grey. What that's really pointing to is somebody who is turned on, who accesses pleasure via something that they consider taboo. So for some people, traditional vanilla sex is taboo, and that would make that person kinky. So we can't just limit kinky to likes to be tied up, likes to have power exchange, likes domination, submission. Sure, all of that's in there for whomever is turned on by that. But the key element is taboo. What's taboo for that person? And then the fifth blueprint is what's called the shapeshifter, which is somebody who is legitimately fed, legitimately desires something from the other four. So they love variety and they like a lot of a lot. They just really enjoy all the different expressions and mixtures. And it's not that they can shapeshift to please someone else. It's that today I'm in the mood for this. Next week I might be in the mood for that. Last week I was in the mood for this. Or day to day, hour to hour changes. It's just someone who's really fed by all of the other blueprints. And so each of these has superpowers. Each of these have shadows. And often it's one blueprint that is somebody's, what I call the key to their front door of turn on. And once they're in the house of turn on, then they might start exploring the others. But what's the element that they really need to feel at ease and in pleasure, and that they're enjoying themselves and truly expressing their authentic erotic self? So that's the blueprints in a nutshell. And I like to offer that framing to help partners understand each other, understand themselves first off, because maybe they don't know inherently, like, oh, wow, given my druthers, I actually do need something taboo. That is where my turn on is. I didn't know that about myself. Or someone else might realize they're more subtle and energetic and soft, and they start to see where they overlap and where they don't. And then they can start to expand the understanding of each other's pathways to turn on. And that provides much more, a broader list of possibilities. So the different activities that might turn each of those blueprints on can then go into the repertoire of the couple to use to explore beyond just penetrative sex.
And you can see where the pre-cancer self can fit into one of those blueprints, but then after everything that happens, then
exactly
it shifts. And then again, having that conversation with the partner.
Exactly. And that happened for me in a lot of ways. Now, I will say I ended the relationship I was in shortly after diagnosis because I realized I cannot show up as the partner that this person has been accustomed to me showing up as. I just can't do relationship. So we need to not go on this ride together. So I was very grateful that I did that. And then my sexual drive paused for quite a while because I lost a lot of weight. And so and also the treatments were really strong. So that just put me on a pause. My hormones turned off, not medically, but just because I lost so much weight, my period stopped and my sex drive went away. But I'm blessed with very affectionate friends. And I was already oriented as a sensual blueprint and an energetic blueprint. So I was already in that, like, the emotional connection really feeds me. Massage really feeds me. It doesn't have to be erotic for it to be pleasurable and full of intimacy and closeness and connection. And, just spending quality time with friends really, really fed me. So I didn't miss being in relationship. I felt I was in many relationships, just being really well cared for by a number of people. And so I was already sensual blueprint, energetic blueprint. But on the other side of my cancer journey, after 3 surgeries, lots of scarring, weight loss, just a really frail body for a period of time, I became in need of, like, much softer, much more subtle, much gentler type of interactions as my sex drive started to turn back on. And also I had my own body shame from scars, and my body had changed when I'd lost so much weight and then started to plump back up, and I cut all my hair off, and it was just took some time to reorient to this new body, this new identity. And it was really fascinating to see how I had shifted my blueprint. Even though it was still in the same domain, it had gone really to a bit of an extreme for a while, in a good way, just in a different way. And I actually coined the term as a sexologist, a researcher and infinitely interested in these things. I actually coined the term for a new sexual orientation that's not dependent on genitals, but I call it subtle sexual and subtle sexuality. And that's how I began to identify. And that's really someone who needs slow, soft, subtle, a lot of emotional connection and care, both receiving, but of course giving also, and then just needing to be gentle, go just quite mindfully. Even like the arc into starting the new relationship that I started, it took us very deliberately 4 months before we even brought in intercourse, because we were exploring so many other dimensions of subtle sexuality and ways to be intimate that kept pace with my nervous system.
I think the nervous system component is so fascinating because hearing you talk about it, it makes absolute sense. I mean, you go through your body, your mind, your spirit goes through the shock of a diagnosis and the
Right.
treatment. And so, there's an element of PTSD, and you're used to being handled in a certain way in a doctor's office.
Right.
Yeah, so the nervous system part is really interesting, I find. Are there any, I don't know, would it be like working with breath work? Like, what are different ways that somebody, I guess it could be, apart from the sexual and intimacy, it's just trying to rebalance that nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And there's a number of ways. And as it pertains to a solo practice, there's applying one's hands to the body, just in an area that's not so tender, and just feeling the weight and the warmth of one's own hands and knowing that one has agency, that they can at any point move the hand to another area. Nothing's expected. Nothing needs to happen. They're just feeling the hand rise and fall with the breath. And they're staying very present and in the moment with their own breath, and noticing, oh, wow, I'm feeling this particular emotion come up, or this emotional quality, or I'm feeling really relaxed right now, or, just staying very present with their self helps us return to what's called our window of tolerance when we're in our parasympathetic nervous system and we're not leaving our experience or shutting down because we're overwhelmed. So that's just a very basic solo practice. And then how that can work with partners, because a lot of times, like you were saying, Leah, with the handling and the medical realm, where you're just a body that's poked and prodded, and people do that with care, medical professionals, but also they've got a job to do. They need to get in and out. They're not there particularly to offer bedside manner. And so, our bodies, mine certainly went into flinch mode. I didn't have a lot of buffer, a lot of armors, because I was dropped down to 74 pounds. So, I was very, very
Wow.
small, and just, even though people were being nice, I was not being threatened, but my nervous system,
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of buffer and didn't know the difference. And so one thing that can help partners reconnect and can help the partner who's either the patient or the survivor return to that baseline of calm and parasympathetic nervous system is that they're receiving touch that's not moving all over their body really fast, that's not going for an erogenous zone and hanging out there. That's just they get to ask for the touch and have it applied in the place they want it, exactly as they want it, and nothing else is going to happen until they ask for something else or until a timer that's set for 2 minutes goes off, and that person gets to feel the trust return to their body and also the trust return with the partner representing an outside stimulation. And so that's something that I recommend because often we just need to start with the basics, like the early basic, simple things. And that's where the most impact is for returning to intimacy and connecting and feeling what we're feeling.
And you brought up trust, and that's something that I felt myself, as well as I've heard from my patients, is you don't trust your body anymore. There was
it can definitely feel that way.
There was a betrayal in some way, like, you tried to kill me. I've been good to you all these years, And so I love the idea of, placing your hands on your body yourself.
Yeah.
Before introducing your partner into that, because I know, again, with myself, like, I couldn't look at my post mastectomy body for a long time. And so why would I want anyone else to look at it?
Oh, absolutely. And for me, I didn't have mastectomy because I had different types of cancer, but I had 3 abdominal surgeries. And that left me with huge scarring and I always forget how to pronounce this, diastasis recti. So my fascia got stretched. So my belly extended and I looked like a 5-month pregnant person from the side, which was not the look I was going for. Also tiny, but with this big belly sticking out. And I was just so self-conscious, just wearing big clothes. And for the longest time, didn't want to reveal my body. And if I did, it was in the pitch black, all dark. And also I covered my mirrors for months when I was ill because it was just so hard to even see, basically skeletal, and not deliberately. It was just like, body, what's going on? I can't look at this because I can't join in with the fear of how I'm going to react and the meaning I'm going to give to this. So I'm going to just not look at this at this time. So I covered my mirrors. But yeah, it takes a while for someone to reconnect with that body comfort and this new expression of self.
So when there is physical pain involved, how does one, I don't want to say work around it, but like, how does one maintain that intimacy?
Yeah. Well, again, how are we defining intimacy? Because to force oneself out of a sense of obligation, for me, is not contributing to intimacy.
What was kind of driving that question is just hearing from patients where they would say, oh, well, my oncologist told me use it or lose it, and that's kind of going away. But
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
That is something that was being told to patients. I think about my patients who had radiation for like cervical cancer.
Yeah.
And, there are resources for them with using dilators and,
exactly.
And going gently and sizing up and all of that. But I have heard or had patients tell me that what they heard from the oncologist was, when you're going through radiation, keep having intercourse because use it or lose it.
Intense. Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah.
I mean, that just sounds...
Well, I'll tell you this, because I have some clients. They're a couple. They've been married for 35 years. She had all of her reproductive organs removed. And she's doing well. And I think it was metastatic. So this might, her treatment might be ongoing, but she's now in a stabilized place where she can return to intimacy in a more formal way. And she's had the dilators and has used them, but the pain is just too much, or has been just too much, so much that intercourse has not been possible with her partner. And so what we worked on in the weeks that we worked together, the 3 of us, was redefining intimacy, kind of understanding our motivations, what their motivations were for them, also identifying their erotic blueprints and ways to expand and learn about each other's blueprints to have more activities that aren't just use it or lose it, PV, penis vagina sex or nothing, and they were finding all kinds of beautiful ways to connect, to be frolicky and flirty, and they're in their 60s. This was so wonderful to see. They've gone camping trips and, kind of be like teenagers exploring their bodies and using hands and tongue and mouth, so there was a lot of closeness and a lot of pleasure and a lot of satisfaction. It just wasn't looking the way part of what they were accustomed to was not available. But we were aiming to create such a broader repertoire of activities and possibilities that wasn't missed. Like, it was longed for, but it didn't feel like a deficit to the relationship because they did the work of expanding their personal understandings of desire and intimacy.
I love that.
Yeah. And so she's still practicing. We were like, maybe just the head of the penis right at the opening and gently, and even that was just too much at this time. But we haven't given up on it. We've just said, go at your own pace and then really put front and center all these other expressions of intimacy that are so nourishing and really connect the two of you in the ways that are important to you.
Do you recommend things like the O-Nut for your clients?
Presently, I don't do a lot of recommending of products. It just really depends. And I don't discourage. I say, you explore on your terms what works for you and your body. That's my, mantra, like what works for you.
With you, it's more on that, like the psychosocial level.
It is. And truth be told, my aim starting in this realm and igniting this mission was not to so much work one-on-one with cancer patients because there are just too many and I'm one person, so my impact as a private practice practitioner would only be so much. So from the beginning, my focus has really been on training the staff and training staff at nonprofits that work with cancer patients, training the staff at clinics to be prepared to have these conversations, make these recommendations, and offer referral pathways. But before I started that, I realized cancer patients and survivors and their partners need something today, need something 25 years ago, So that's when I built cancerandintimacy.com. And I have as a placeholder limited coaching with me at this time for people who might want that. But that was not my aim to build a private practice. My aim is to train other practitioners, staff, yes. And then there will come a point when I get to train folks who are in like naturopathy and acupuncture and marriage and family therapy and all these adjacent professions that complement cancer care so well and provide tools and resources and education for the private practitioners to be able to offer this to their clients who are being affected by cancer directly or indirectly. I'm developing an institute for that. And so there will come a time when through the institute, I'll be able to make recommendations of products and whatnots. But right now I'm developing all the frameworks and all of the handouts and the entire websites. So I haven't done the deep dive to really know or have a clearer idea of what would be helpful.
And you do have a lot of resources on your website. And I didn't download. I was going to do the free download and then I forgot. And then I was
so many.
reviewing it. But there's that resource kit. But there was one thing that I don't believe is part of the resource kit, but there were cards.
Mm-hmm. The PDF that's in the shop. Yep.
Yeah. And so talk about the cards because I thought those looked fascinating.
Yeah. So a little moment ago, you and I were talking about how often the conversation around intimacy might not even be a part of a couple's coupling. They're relating even before cancer showed up. And that's the case for many, many people. So I thought, well, one thing that could be really helpful, because sometimes we don't know how to start a conversation about tender topics. Sometimes we don't know what to say. So the idea came to create a collection of prompts under different categories that are very empowering and affirming and appreciative, and that help a couple have a conversation together exploring these tender realms. So something similar to, like, what would you like me to know about your experience that I presently don't understand? Something like that. And then a patient could share with their partner, I've experienced a lot of pain when we do this activity, and I just don't want to disappoint you because I love our sex life and I want to give to it. And my body's just in a different place right now, and I don't want you to be upset with me because of that. Like that creates intimacy when there's that vulnerability and that softness and that, just sharing our authentic selves. For me, that's the actual definition of intimacy. And then sexual activities complement that. They aren't that at the end of the day.
And I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely is a big part of it. Like you said, I mean, I think it's like start with reframing intimacy. And I think those cards, like to me, it's almost like that, not like a trivia game, but like one of those like, it's just a game, right? I mean, it's like, a truth that
we just pick a card, like, truth and dare.
it's truth and dare without the dare, it's
exactly.
it's just the truth and truth game. And it seems like it's such a great conversation starter for a subject that isn't something that
it's so uncomfortable. Let's just name it. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. It could go it could go sideways so fast, that no wonder we're all afraid.
Whether you're talking to your doctor or your partner, like it's a very awkward.
It is
awkward conversation.
100%. Exactly. So I wanted to provide something that could help lubricate those conversations, if you will. And that item is in my shop. So many other items, and most of the site is completely free to download. I'm excited to provide y'all with a coupon code for your listeners so they can go into the shop page and get 20% discount on any of the items in the shop, including the conversation cards.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you. And we could put that in the show notes along with the website. And is there anything else that you want to add that maybe we didn't touch on in the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of a framework I'm working on, and this can be found in the shop, is this twofold notion of before we can move into what else is possible with our eros, with our intimacy, especially when we're in illness or coming out of illness, is engaging a process that I'm calling erotic grief, and really honoring what is it that I've lost in the context of my sex life, in the context of intimacy, in the context of my eros that I really miss, that I wish was still available, that I'm longing for, that I feel stuck because I keep yearning for my old self, but that's not who's here. All these ways that we get stuck in grief. And grief at the loss of a loved one or a job or a relationship or a house, that's a certain type of grief. But erotic grief is a whole other type of grief that is not really talked about at all. And so it's in honoring the past, and I've created an ebook about erotic grief. It's really a workbook guiding people through explorations of how erotic grief might be showing up for them as a patient, as a survivor, and as a partner, because those are three distinct pathways for reclaiming self in the context of erotic grief. And then what follows that is what I'm calling the libido journal, which is libido listening specifically, which is once we bring everything current, we bring everything present because we've honored the past that's not here. Then from this place of being here now, I can start to listen to my body and its very quiet signals it might be giving me, kind of like knocking on the door saying like, I'm starting to be open again to being touched. I think I might like this type of experience, and it can be gentle. It doesn't have to be intense sexual activity. It can be just like a gentle, and then growing in or expanding into other expressions of libido. And also we're defining, well, what does libido even mean to you? How does your libido express or speak to you? So I have a libido journal that I've created that's in the shop that can guide people through this journey of starting to listen and hear the signals their body's giving them related to intimacy. And so I'm really loving these two pieces together because we're bypassing all of this a lot of times, trying to get back to how we were or what we think sex should look like, even despite the health circumstances that we're in. It's like, no. Let's really look at this holistically and honor as many dimensions of self as we can.
Well, I want to thank you so much for reaching out through LinkedIn, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect.
Oh, me too.
And I really encourage our listeners to seek out your website. And like I said, all the resources I will put in the show notes. And yeah, it was so nice meeting you.
Oh, thank you. You too. And this is such a big conversation. I'm so grateful for all the dimensions we got to really touch in on today.
Yeah, this is its own podcast. I don't know if you have explored that, but this really is its own, its own show. So, hopefully we didn't jump all over the place, but yeah, and I know there's a lot more that we could explore as well. But yeah, again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Cancer Pod. Remember to subscribe, review, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media for updates. And as always, this is not medical advice. These are our opinions. Talk to your doctor before changing anything related to your treatment plan. The Cancer Pod is hosted by me, Dr. Leah Sherman, and by Dr. Tina Kaiser. Music is by Kevin MacLeod. See you next time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.